There's a time as a seeker that I was very depressed by the idea that I had no free will. I come to the conclusion that, okay, there's no free will. That made a lot of sense. Um, Science supported it, philosophy supported it. Everyday experience, in a very important way, supported it. Just as you don't think about where the next words out of your mouth are coming from, you don't decide the next thought you're going to have. You don't decide the feelings you're going to have. You certainly don't decide the circumstances you're going to have. The decisions that you think you're taking are in fact coming from these thoughts and feelings and circumstances. And even the credit that you feel for those decisions is itself something that comes to you from somewhere else. So there's good reason to believe, very good reason to believe, even from an ordinary viewpoint, let alone the spiritual viewpoint, that there's no free will. But this thought really depressed me at one point as a seeker. And the reason it depressed me was because I didn't understand it properly. And this is the danger, the main danger of thinking of a lack of free will, is that it's misunderstood. And what was the misunderstanding? The problem is the lack of free will really properly refers to the fact that everything that you consider you is not you, in a sense. And so all the choices, thoughts, feelings, and so on that you seem to take as yours are in fact given or controlled by something else. Unfortunately, the way that the mind interprets this, the way that many minds interpret this, the way that my mind at one point interpreted this, is that, and I didn't think of it, this is what it was doing, but it was doing this, is that I imagined myself to be a kind of prisoner. I was a person whose choices were controlled for him. It's as if I had a mind and a body that could have been free, but was placed in circumstances that were like a prison. I was in chains. That's how I understood the lack of free will. And naturally, when you feel like you're in chains from which you cannot escape, that leads to depression. But this is a misunderstanding of what a lack of free will is all about. The lack of free will suggests not that you are a prisoner in chains, but that the you that you think you are is itself a construct. The idea of there being a prisoner is itself, in a way, the prison. For whom? For itself. Not for you. It really imprisons nobody. This is why in Hinduism, in Vedanta, the idea of doership and experiencership are coupled as facets of the ego, of the egoic understanding of being, an individual person. If you believe yourself to be the doer, meaning if you believe yourself to be the controller of your own actions, the decider of your own decisions, then you also believe yourself to be the experiencer of your actions. But if you don't believe yourself to be the doer, if you don't believe yourself to be the decider, then the right way to comprehend this is that's the case in the same way that you're not even the experiencer of your actions. Because in the same way that your very thoughts, feelings, and circumstances are constructed by something beyond, so too is the notion that you are a separate individual experiencing those situations. That too is part of the illusion. So it's not that you're a person who could be free but is bound, but rather the very idea of personhood is itself what is the binding illusion. And in fact, it binds nobody at all. There's only a concept of a person who is bound. So doership and experiencership are actually linked. It's not that you're a person who could be free. The very idea of that kind of freedom is incoherent. Incoherent. All the circumstances, all the factors that come together to make you believe that you're a person who does things and decides things are together the same factors that come together to make you believe that you experience life at all. And neither of these things is in fact the case. If free will is understood in this sense, that is to say, the lack of free will is understood as the total illusion of personhood, then at the same time that one understands the lack of free will, the necessary automatic response will be surrender. It will be the stillness that automatically results from knowing that there's nothing to do and nothing to be done. And that stillness is simultaneous with the recognition that it doesn't matter that one has no control, because the one that has no control isn't you. That's a misconception, that it is you. So the consolation for not having free will is that the one who does not have free will is not you. And in fact, what you are is a profound, indescribable peace, which is revealed at the very instant that one understands that one is not the doer. To go one step beyond, is not even not the doer, but is not even the one who could be the doer or not the doer. It is not you who stands in that position. So, correctly understood, the lack of free will leads to peace. But it usually isn't immediately correctly understood. Usually there's a resistance to understanding the lack of free will in the proper way, which then requires the practice of surrender or self-inquiry to overcome, because the question is, who is it that believes they have this free will? That would be inquiry. Or to practice surrender would be then to revisit the fact that over and over and over again, the thoughts of either free will or lack of free will themselves are in a kind of sphere, and that sphere is against a background. That background is not bound by notions of free will or lack of free will. That background is not in any sense a prisoner or confused. So there's resistance to understanding the lack of free will. That resistance is overcome through practice. The practice is applying your nominal free will, the free will that you think you have. It is said, apply it to inquiry or surrender. But the end result of that will be to overcome or transcend the initial understanding of free will entirely. Which is to say, ultimately, it's not exactly that we lack free will, it's that the very idea of free will is incoherent. Just like the very idea of being an individual self is not exactly wrong so much as it is nonsensical.